Hayden Panettiere spent almost her entire life in front of a camera. She was still a baby when she began appearing in commercials, and before she was old enough to understand what celebrity meant, Hollywood had already made her a familiar face. By her teenage years, she had become one of television's most recognizable young stars. But behind the success, Panettiere was living a much more complicated story, one involving fame, motherhood, addiction, loss, abuse, recovery, and a lifelong struggle to decide who she really was beyond the characters she played. Born in New York in 1989, Panettiere entered acting as a child and quickly accumulated television and film credits. She appeared in One Life to Live, Guiding Light, Ally McBeal, Remember the Titans, and even voiced Princess Dot in Pixar's A Bug's Life. Then, in 2006, everything changed. At just 17, she became Claire Bennet on Heroes, the cheerleader with a supernatural ability to heal. The role transformed Hayden from a successful child actor into an international star. But Heroes was only the beginning. In 2012, Panettiere took another defining role as Juliette Barnes on Nashville, playing a young country singer whose ambition and personal problems often collided. The performance showed another side of her talent because Hayden was not simply acting, she was also singing. Her work on the series earned her 2 Golden Globe nominations, while her music became part of the show's identity. On screen, she appeared to have exactly what Hollywood promised young stars: talent, recognition, and a future that seemed almost limitless. Away from television, her personal life was becoming increasingly complicated. Panettiere began a relationship with heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko, and the couple eventually became engaged. In December 2014, they welcomed their daughter, Kaya. But motherhood brought challenges Hayden later described in painful detail. She experienced severe postpartum depression, while her relationship with alcohol and prescription medication became increasingly destructive. Eventually, she entered treatment and began confronting problems that could no longer be hidden behind the image of a Hollywood star. One of the most painful consequences was her relationship with her daughter. In 2018, Panettiere agreed for Klitschko to have full custody of Kaya while she focused on getting healthy. Hayden later described the decision as heartbreaking, but said she understood that she was not in a position to provide the stability her daughter needed at that time. It became one of the most misunderstood chapters of her life. Publicly, people could see a famous mother separated from her child. Privately, Hayden said the reality was about survival and recovery. Then came another damaging chapter. After her relationship with Klitschko ended, Panettiere became involved with Brian Hickerson. Their relationship became the subject of domestic violence allegations, and Hickerson was later convicted of assaulting Panettiere. Hayden eventually spoke about the experience publicly, describing the relationship as traumatic and acknowledging how difficult it had been to admit that it happened to her. For someone who had spent years playing strong women on television, acknowledging vulnerability in her own life was an entirely different kind of battle. And then, in 2023, Hayden experienced another devastating loss. Her younger brother, Jansen Panettiere, also an actor, died at just 28. His family later said he died from complications involving an enlarged heart and an aortic valve condition. The loss came after years in which Hayden had already been trying to rebuild her life. Grief became another part of a story that had already included addiction, postpartum depression, separation from her daughter, and domestic abuse. Yet Hayden was still trying to move forward. She returned to the Scream franchise as Kirby Reed, continued discussing recovery, and gradually became more open about the experiences she had once tried to keep private. Then, in May 2026, she released This Is Me, a reckoning, a memoir in which she confronted her childhood in Hollywood, addiction, postpartum depression, domestic abuse, grief, and the pressure of growing up under constant public scrutiny. For perhaps the first time, Hayden was not playing a character. She was telling the story herself. The memoir also revealed another part of Hayden's identity. In May, she publicly came out as bisexual, explaining that she had dated women but had never felt comfortable sharing that part of herself with the world. She spoke about growing up under pressure to appear perfect and about finally reaching a point where she felt able to be honest. And during the memoir's promotion, she sounded hopeful. She spoke about recovery, motherhood, her future, and the possibility of rebuilding. At a May 26th event in Los Angeles, one of her final major public appearances, Panettiere discussed the painful experiences behind the book. She talked about addiction, postpartum depression, childhood fame, and the complicated decision involving her daughter. But there was also something striking about the way she spoke about the future. Hayden said people had approached her to tell her that her honesty had encouraged them to seek help. After years of being defined by headlines about what had gone wrong, she appeared determined to leave behind something larger than the headlines. Then, on Sunday, August 16th, that story suddenly changed. Hayden Panettiere was found unresponsive inside a home in Greenville, South Carolina. According to reports, a friend called emergency services at approximately 1:51 in the afternoon. Responders arrived to a report involving an unresponsive woman and cardiac arrest, and life-saving efforts were attempted. Panettiere was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 36 years old. The circumstances surrounding her death are still being investigated. TMZ and other outlets have reported that the emergency call included a possible overdose reference, but that is not an official cause of death. Authorities have not announced that an overdose caused Panettiere's death. The preliminary investigation has reportedly found no signs of foul play, and an autopsy is expected to provide more information. That distinction matters because Hayden had spent years publicly discussing addiction and recovery. It would be easy to reduce her entire life to those struggles, especially now. But that would leave out the child who became an actress, the performer who carried 2 major television series, the mother who fought to remain connected to her daughter, the woman who survived an abusive relationship, and the person who had only months earlier decided to tell her own story without hiding the difficult parts. Hayden Panettiere's death came at a moment when she appeared to be reclaiming control over her narrative. Her memoir had finally put her experiences into her own words, and she was talking about a future that still seemed open. Now, the questions surrounding her final hours will continue to be investigated. What happened inside that Greenville home may eventually become clearer, but for now, the official cause remains unknown. What remains is a complicated legacy. Hayden Panettiere was never simply the cheerleader from Heroes or the country singer from Nashville. She was a performer who became famous before she was old enough to choose fame, a woman who publicly fought battles that many people never saw, and a mother who continued trying to rebuild her life. Her story ended far earlier than anyone expected, and perhaps the most important thing to remember is that Hayden had just begun telling that story in her own voice. If you want the full story behind Hayden Panettiere's rise, struggles, recovery, and final days, stay with us as we continue following what investigators uncover.